Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to 5x3. It is now 2022, and yes, Rebecca and I are just getting to our first podcast of the new year. It's been a bit of a challenge the last month,
Dude,
right?
Yeah, we both got COVID.
I still have COVID. I'm still testing.
Although I tested negative every time I took the test, but I swear I had it, and people in my family did.
No, I swear people have it. I think people who test negative, there's something going on. Everyone's getting it, and we got it, unfortunately. Diego, I don't know where he brought it in from, but it's him. It definitely was him. It wasn't me. But January was just a busy month. We just kind of kept trying to do the podcast, and between that and I think animals,
sore throats, not being able to talk, 4-H nonsense,
yappy dogs.
Oh my Lord, yeah, that's true.
Yappy dogs. We were now just getting into it. So, and I know that I kind of teased everybody last week by saying, "Hey, new podcast coming up soon." And then I threw them an oldie but goodie, which actually was a really good podcast. Diego re-listened to the podcast on auto-regulation.
Oh yeah, well, he was in on that one, right?
He was in on that one, and Ryan brought it up and said how good it was. So Diego, of course, had to re-listen to it and agreed with Ryan that it was a great podcast, primarily because I think Diego was in it. And so, but he liked what he had to say and what we all had to say. And it got some new hits. So I think that was a good one to share. And I think it was a good segue into what we're going to talk about today, because in that podcast, we talked about, I guess we focused on on RPE, all the regulation, kind of listening, thinking about how to approach your training. And we know it's about a month in already, but I think, everyone's still trying to figure out what is their new year, new year goals going to be for 2022. And
or not even that. Maybe they've adopted a goal, found out it's not working, and might want to
make some changes
a little bit.
Yeah. So we listened to a good podcast recently that Diego had listened to. These two guys, Eric Trexler and Greg Nuckols, who are with Stronger by Science, and their latest podcast, or the one that we just listened to, was on goal setting. And we liked a lot with what they had to say, because it was very much in keeping with the philosophy that Rebecca and I have in our own training and with our clients. So we thought we would kind of jump into that, pick that apart a bit, and share our thoughts on approaching goals in relation to training, more so than nutrition, but I think nutrition kind of applies to both.
Or really any life habit.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned to me about a client of yours who was kind of talking to you about something along those lines, right? Of like the new year and new you, new me.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And
it was very interesting because you do always get bombarded in January, end of December, January, with these new year, new you, right? And those sort of have always rubbed me the wrong way. I don't exactly know why. I mean, I guess I feel like, on the one hand, if somebody recognizes that there is a way that they could change or improve, why do you have to wait until January?
Right.
Start where and when you are. But the thing that my client had picked up on that was, slightly irritating to her about this messaging was the implication that there's something wrong with you the way you are now.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, that is the message that underlies a lot of advertising, right? Like tapping into people's insecurities. And that's often what makes the advertising successful. And there are certain messages like New Year, New You that are just sort of standard and expected at particular times of year. They're easy to generate. It's easy sales at that time of year because people are expecting that and therefore looking for it. But yeah, the underlying message that there's something wrong with you the way you are now and you better get better.
Yeah.
Was the thing she was reacting against.
Yeah. And I think that it's, because it comes right after the holidays.
So when everybody is already plumped up.
Exactly. I think everybody comes after the holidays. You've had Thanksgiving, you've had Christmas, you've had holiday parties, you've had so many things. You haven't been able to maybe make it to the gym because you're torn because of traveling, to visit family. So you're already kind of at this place where like, great, look at me. I haven't been in the gym for a couple of weeks. I've eaten all these Christmas cookies, la, 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 la. Instead of like realizing that's just how it is. It's the time of year. It's a holiday. And now it's January 1st. It's the next day. So when people,
and now it's back to normal.
Right, back to normal.
I got to do a reboot and change everything because I'm not okay.
And I know that, people will ask me, have you seen a lot of new people join the gym lately? And I'm like, we're not that kind of gym. We're not that place where people decide, I think I'm going to go join, join 5 by 3.
That's like a lot of gyms are like that. And the joke always is come January 1st, you can't find a piece of equipment. You can't find a spare weight. You can't find any place to stand in a gym. Right. And then St. Patrick's Day, they're all gone.
Right.
And it's that's about as long as the goal lasts.
Those of us who, you and I, who have been training, who started this, number of years ago and have definitely changed our thinking and our mindset about training and about what the gym means to us. It's just another day. It's like it's next week. My training continues. But for many people, they haven't quite gotten to that place yet. Maybe it's something that and maybe they never will. Maybe it's like, there are other things that are more important to them, which is totally fine. But perhaps it's because of the way that they approach the gym, the thinking of what exercise is. And I think that's the whole point of like kind of this, what is a goal and how do you set a goal? Because I think the people, when they set goals, they set very open-ended, elaborate goals that aren't really specific to what they need. And that's because they probably don't really quite know how to set that goal. A goal can be, many different things. I want to lose 10 pounds. That's a goal, but how are you going to approach that goal? What are the necessary steps you're going to take to get there? And that's where goals fall short. And that's where people fall short with their goals. And I think that was what we wanted to kind of touch on today is how can we help people and how do we help our own clients, get a better idea of how to focus, how to find a better focus when coming to the gym, when how to approach their eating, how to approach their training, so that it becomes more of a lifestyle change for them. And there's a reason for them to be there. And they really have a good handle on what that reason is. Mm-hmm. I think that's why people end up with this whole like new year, new me, because they never have anything very specific that they can kind of fall back on. And they just haven't had the time to maybe either think about it, or no one's helped them, approach their goal thinking, in such a way that makes sense to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of, our job as coaches to help people understand, well, what do they want out of this? So we have a couple different notes here. I don't know where you want to start. What's the best approach?
I think what you're talking about now is actually the bit from one of the bits of the podcast that I found really interesting is in talking about how to set a goal. I guess there were several studies that sort of differentiated between types of goals, right? So like when I did my studying to be a personal trainer or whatever, they teach you about a SMART goal, whatever, that stands for. And it's very specific, and there's measured bits of, how you're going to achieve this goal. It's very step-by-step and kind of looks at the minutia, right? So sometimes people, if they're saying like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, okay, spell that out. How? Right. Make a SMART goal. How is that going to happen? Right. But so that's one piece of goal making. but there needs to be some infrastructure behind that. And the wording that was coming up in the podcast was superordinate goal, right? So that was the sort of goal they described. A lot of times people would say, oh, that's just too vague and too general, but it's a goal that kind of taps into your identity, who you are, the big why, right? So if you're going to the gym to lose 5 pounds, lose 5 pounds might be like a medium level goal. It might be somewhat inspirational. You might have a subordinate or SMART goal, a more specific goal that spells out how you're going to lose the 10 pounds. But there needs to be a bigger why, a rationale. How does that goal of losing 10 pounds connect to your identity? Like the goal might be like, like I want to lose 10 pounds because then I feel more comfortable in my body. I'm able to be more active in life. I'm able to more fully participate in activities with my family. Something that touches on your identity, right? So if you're not really a gym person, but being available and healthy and active for your family is your primary concern, then you need to somehow tap your goal into that identity piece in order to stay motivated. Because there are going to be days where it's like you just don't even give a crap about going to the gym. You would really much rather on like some rainy winter day curl up under a blanket and binge watch Ozark or something, right? But like you oh my God. But like you can find the willpower to make yourself go to the gym if you've tapped into something that touches on your core identity, right? Like, so I like to go to the gym. So gym-based goals are usually not as hard for me to support or follow through on, even on hard days. But like the thing I'm trying to work on this year a lot has to do with more, leadership or communication style, that sort of thing. But it's not my personality, right? So being able to kind of connect that to something that's more relevant to how I perceive myself is more likely to make me work at that than just something, measured and nitpicky when I don't feel like it.
I like that. I mean, I have a client who, and this is in regards to losing weight, tried for a couple of years now and didn't quite, find the focus to really make it happen. She lost some weight, but then she'd go off the rails and she didn't really worry about it. But now there's a specific reason for needing to lose that weight. And as a result, she's down 50 pounds.
Wow.
So that, and I think it became though there was a reason, there was a specific reason because there's a surgery involved. But more importantly, finally, the weight started to come off and she started to see what was really going on with her eating and with her relationship with food. And then it became a lot easier to continue to lose the weight because she discovered she was losing weight and she was eating. She was still enjoying the foods that she always enjoys. The foods that were her comfort food, she needed less. But she also allowed herself to have those foods when she needed them, knowing that it was something that she knew why she was eating it. And she knew why she needed it at that time, but then she didn't need it at another time. And that had always been there, but it didn't come out until she had a more specific reason for the weight loss. And then as a result of that, the kind of, I don't want to say epiphany, but something occurred and it became a lot easier. And over time she continues to track, but it's a tracking more so on a less like daily basis as more of just kind of a weekly basis. Yeah. And she's happy. She's quite happy with the process. And it's only been, hasn't even been a year.
Wow, great.
So that is, and
if she's doing it for a full year too, that demonstrates the sustainability of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is somebody who, I've known for a long time now, and it wasn't the right time. Maybe I shouldn't say it wasn't the right time. There wasn't the right mental you know, the goal wasn't specific enough.
The big why.
The big why wasn't there yet. The big why wasn't there yet. So that's, you know, and then once it was there, it made all the difference. So yes. I want to talk about, since I just mentioned kind of with her, the comfort foods, and when she would try to avoid those foods, it was harder for her. And then she found she ended up eating more of that because there wasn't quite the understanding of why she needed it. The approach versus avoidance. And I think this goes into a lot of people's goals and goal making, oftentimes in relationship to eating. And again, Rebecca and I are neither dietitians nor are we doctors. So this is not medical advice, full disclaimer. But I think that can be, you know, that can definitely be a tribute. You can have that towards eating, but you can also have that towards towards exercise too, right? Avoiding certain things, trying to, you know, add in more cardio, thinking that's what you need to lose weight, avoiding things that you for fear of, you know, becoming, you know, too sore, too bulky. Right. So,
you know. I've got a question. So like in terms of food, like I definitely see that, right? When people have avoidance behavior, typically what they'll talk about is good foods and bad foods. And usually it's like carbs are bad and, you know, that sort of thing. And obviously, you know, that ends up for a lot of people turning into a situation where like just on some level, that food is bad. That's the food I want. I just ate a whole lot of it because I couldn't stop myself. Now I am bad because I ate the bad food. Right. So it's just this sort of, and now that I'm bad, I may as well just eat more of that bad food. Right. So that avoidance behavior and labeling foods good or bad is generally not a helpful approach.
I hate that approach.
Yeah. So, and I get what you're saying too, though, with exercise, like avoiding some exercise, like you see that a lot where women may know, oh, it's in your best interest to develop muscle and build strength, and that increases your resting metabolic rate. But I want to avoid that because I don't want to get bulky. But if they're adding cardio, isn't that approaching something? It's not the most effective approach.
Sure.
But they're adding something, so that's a positive addition as opposed to
not doing anything.
Yeah,
that's why I said it's hard. Like I think, you know, approach versus avoidance is definitely more geared towards the nutrition, and I don't want to not talk about that because I think that is a big part of it. I mean, people going to the gym is beneficial for losing weight, absolutely, but going to the gym and exercising is not going to help you lose weight until you get a handle on how you're eating and what you're eating. Mm-hmm. And most people, when they make goals of weight loss specifically, they decide to just cut out everything that's quote unquote bad for them, right? Everything that they've learned that is bad. So there's this avoidance. And that's where I have a hard time with like the different like Whole30 and paleo, or anything that really is restrictive, like restricts, you can't have this, you're not supposed to have this. That sends a different message to somebody as opposed to, you need to eat an array of foods, and this array of foods will help you with your goal of X, Y, or Z, performance goal, weight loss goal, weight gain, whatever it is. So this avoidance tends to lead, I think, people to it's a definitely more restrictive way of eating, and can also lead people to
binge.
Yeah. And what happens after that month is over and you decide to add those foods back in and you find yourself eating it never wins. You know, I had a New Year's resolution for years, and Rebecca and I were talking about this before we started the podcast, which was no cheese. It was the no cheese resolution. That never went over well. I have no idea where that no cheese came from. I think because I like cheese, but cheese is calorically dense and it was fattening for me. And if I ate it, I overdid it. So I just decided I was just not going to eat it at all. Well, I have learned over the years of working on this that is never a good approach to avoid. As I said with my client who was trying to avoid eating foods that she enjoyed, but then would just binge on those later, as opposed to eating those foods. And people talk about moderation, and it works. Adding in better foods, adding in meals. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if it's like 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, or if you decide that you need to eat 6 or 7 meals throughout the day, but you're eating, and then finding that those foods that you tend to maybe overeat, you're not eating as much or eating at all, simply because there are other foods that have taken up more space, more time. They're enjoyable too. And you're reaping the benefits every time you step on the scale, or you put a piece of an article of clothing on. Something is different. Something feels different. The scale says something different. You're moving in obviously the right direction, right? So this idea of avoidance tends to be so much more restrictive and can lead to many other issues with yourself mentally and physically. And so that's a big thing with me when I talk about nutrition with my clients. I work primarily on just helping them build better habits. Part of that is this whole approach versus avoidance.
Well, and I think the other thing with, in the discussion of approach versus avoidance is it's the difference also between a positive goal and a negative goal.
Exactly.
Right? Like avoidance, you're going to not do something. An approach attitude, you're going to do something.
Right.
So, it's always easier to do a thing than sit around in the room staring at the cake, not eating it, right? Like, it's always easier to be active about approaching and doing something as opposed to restraining yourself.
Right.
So, like, as opposed to, if your goal is, not drink the wine, right? Instead of an avoidance goal, I'm going to not drink the wine, have an approach goal, like I'm going to drink a glass of tea instead, or a cup of tea instead. Exactly. So something that you can do that substitutes for the thing that you're trying not to do. It's always easier. And then I think that habits and the wiring in your brain around the pattern of coming home, I'm stressed out, I'm going to have a glass of wine, or whatever it is, get that pattern, that habit gets rewired.
Right.
And then you carve out these different pathways in your brain where you can produce a different response sort of automatically, without having to spend as much energy avoiding the thing because you found a substitute.
And with regards to the alcohol, that's absolutely true. I mean, instead of saying I'm not going to, or I'm swearing off, say instead of, a glass of white wine, I'm going to have a seltzer. If that's something that you're choosing to do, and I think that's everyone should find what works best for them. Having a glass of wine is not a bad thing in itself. Having a bottle of wine may be a bad thing in itself if you're having a bottle of wine a night, right? So deciding that you're going to have a glass of wine as opposed to I'm not going to drink at all.
Go ahead.
No, I think it's the positive versus the negative, right? Yeah. I'm going to do X as opposed to I'm not going to. And it's the same thing with like when I talk to people with their training, instead of saying you can't or don't do, it's how can you approach that, that with saying, I see that you're, when you're squatting, you tend to be on your toes. So let's make sure that you're on your, you're in the middle of the foot next time, as opposed to don't do this.
Right. Because the minute you tell the person don't get in their toes, right? Now all of a sudden they're thinking about their toes. Their weight is going to automatically shift into their toes because they're hyper focused on their toes. You're always trying
to cue. You're always trying to talk about. You're trying to be. There's that whole positive to negative, right? Mm-hmm. But also just in reinforcing good habits, reinforcing thinking of approaching something in a different way, right? So instead of get off your toes, it's all right. Stay in the middle of your foot. Stay in the middle of your foot. Shove it. Don't do, or that's. So I think as far as like positive versus negative, and we need to kind of we need to think about that in our own with ourselves, because if we're always talking about things in the negative and things are bad, we're going to feel really bad about ourselves when we when we fall off that wagon.
Yeah. And like you're saying, it's not like the glass of wine from time to time is not horrible, right? A lot of people, I mean, whatever, the studies are mixed. Some studies will suggest that helps people lower their stress level and has some health benefits, blah, 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 whatever. But that sort of falls under the category of the idea of slack with a cost, right? Like there's something or touches on that same idea. Like there's a behavior, or maybe something that you're trying to improve on, but you're not going to be 100% on it all the time. And you can make choices. You can say, you know what, this is my anniversary and I'm choosing to have this glass of wine, or, just whatever it is. I mean, you were mentioning before Whole30 or Paleo, and I'm not real familiar with those. My sister-in-law does Whole30 all the time, but I did a couple rounds of a different program that was called the Whole Life Challenge. Mm-hmm. And they had this sort of slack with a cost built into the way they set up the program. So there were actually, like we're saying you're not supposed to do, but there were a list of foods that you were not going to eat, right? So that wasn't great, but there was slack along with that, right? So you were earning points, you were part of a team, so you're like motivated because you're competing against your friends. Like, who doesn't want to get more points than their friend? Right. But you can pick and choose. So and the thing about that, a lot of it, I think, it took sort of maybe a similar elimination diet approach to maybe what I understand Whole30 to be, where you learn a lot about your body and your digestion if you take out a lot of the things that often cause digestive distress for people.
Yes.
And then you make a choice at the end, if you want, or various times throughout to add those things back in. It was like a learning process. Yes. It was an exploratory endeavor, as opposed to a hard and fast avoid these things. It was sort of the approach to it was, you're going to try and avoid these things, and if you want the full points, who doesn't, if you're slightly competitive, and I had a friend that I did this with who was super competitive, which sort of made me a little bit more competitive than I generally am, but anyway, so it was like you wanted to try and get the points, but you could pick and choose if it was a special occasion, or even if it wasn't, even if it was just, today I want to eat the cake.
Right.
So okay, fine. So I take 1 point off. I have 5 points to spend every day. I've got 5 points to spend. If I choose to eat the cake today, it's not the end of the world.
I like that. Yeah, this, and I like that whole. I think of like slack with the cost. And I think we talk going back to about, digestive issues. That's certainly the case with, sometimes when people decide that they need to make some changes to their diet. It's not necessarily because they're trying to lose weight, but they've been having some issues. I had off and on the past month or so, some real acid reflux issues, and realized I was drinking a lot more coffee than I had been. And coffee tends to kind of do that to me. And I've taken coffee out of my eating before. And so I did it again. I took it out for a good couple weeks, and things calmed down. Things definitely calmed down. So then
in your stomach, if that was me, my life would be in chaos then. Like, what? No coffee?
I've reintroduced it, and I tend to, I was drinking black coffee. Now I have to drink it with like some type of, cream, and I usually use like almond milk for that. And I like to add, kind of like a little bit of hot chocolate to it to make a little mocha. So, but now I have it just in the morning. And I have 2 cups of coffee, and that's perfect. That satisfies me. I was having it a lot. And that happens to me. When I like something, I tend to kind of go overboard. And eventually.
Yeah, whatever. It's 12 o'clock now, and I finished a pot of coffee, and I had to make another one, like an espresso.
Yeah, see, I can't do that right now. Like,
they're not all caffeine coffees.
I finished my cup, and I'm done for the day. The rest of the day is going to be tea. So, but that was definitely in line with, digestive issues. And I've done that.
Yeah, and that taps into like a superordinate goal, right? Like there's something bigger. There's a bigger reason
and you have to take something out in order to
I want to be comfortable in my life and not feel this burning sensation coming up my esophagus.
Constantly belching, so I've had to think about like what foods, what drinks, maybe possibly, I need to avoid. Beer is one of those. I love beer. I haven't had a beer since September. I was having a lot, and I realized that when I do have one, I have a lot of digestive issues. Now, as Diego likes to say, welcome to getting older. which I have to say, I wasn't experiencing this how many years ago. So there's a lot more.
A big piece of truth there.
There's a lot more that I have to think about in terms of my eating habits and what I can eat and how much I can eat and what I can drink and what I can't drink, because I have there are changes going on. Mm-hmm. So there oftentimes that is it. And that is not so much restrictive, or avoiding because you're trying to avoid because you have this elaborate goal of like, I need to, lose, 10 pounds or something like that. It's more of, this is something that is causing some disruption to myself. I don't feel comfortable. Yeah. I need to make myself more comfortable.
It's almost not even in a way. I mean, yeah, you are avoiding the coffee or you are avoiding the beer, but it's almost not that. It's like instead you're embracing like a better digestive system. Exactly. And these are the steps that you need to take.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like the coffee and the beer is horrible and you're horrible if you eat it. It's like, I can make that choice and I can have the beer and then I'm going to burp and I'm going to have this like nasty feeling in my stomach.
And
and if I decide that that's worth it because I want to be part of the celebration or, just whatever it is.
Yeah. And
that's different than that's about food.
Right. Before we move on from this goal, because I know, Rebecca and I have a goal of the time, how long we want to spend on this. Something along the lines of the whole approach versus avoidance, slack with the cost, even flexible eating versus rigid goals. This goes way back to a podcast we talked about with body image. A lot of my feelings on restrictive eating and why I don't like people doing things where they avoid foods is because it goes back to my issues with my own eating when I was younger and even into my 20s, into my 30s. I've gotten to a point where I don't do that. I don't avoid foods because I'm afraid I'm going to get fat, or I'm afraid I'm going to gain weight. I don't eat certain foods because A, of how they make me feel. Or B, I just don't like them. That's about it. And yes, there are foods, and I talk to my clients about this, that I just don't bring into my house because I know that I will eat the entire bag. That's just who I am. And that's okay too, to know yourself that there are certain foods that you just don't need. They're not going to help me with my performance goal. They're going to make me uncomfortable. I'm going to feel bad if I eat the whole thing, even though I do love my Michelle's granola. And that's okay. That's knowing yourself. And that's taken a lot of time for me to get to that point. A lot of work on my part. So when people talk about restricting and doing diets where they eliminate X, Y, or Z, that's way too much. And I had a hard time even getting comfortable with the whole macros thing, right? Like if it fits your macros type of thing, like following protein and carbs, because I found myself going, nope, too restrictive. Don't want to do that. That's going back to my eating issues. And I don't want to, I've let that go now. I can embrace that. I have embraced it. And I've continued on with this better and healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
But that's where that fear from me comes from, where I never tell people what they should eat, how much they should eat. It's more of just, and I guess not so much in the case of protein. I do tell people get 100 grams of protein. I do have that number, but that's where it stops. Everything else is kind of up to them. And it goes back to my own personal, history.
I think like you're saying though, it gets back to knowing oneself and understanding the why behind why you're doing something.
Exactly.
Right. So if you are avoiding a food and you know that you have a streak of perfectionism, right? That's where something that is restrictive diet as opposed to something that's flexible is going to be maybe more problematic, right? Like if you already have a tendency towards perfectionism and you have a very rigid diet plan, that is more likely to be problematic, more likely to be something like if you have obsessive behaviors or those things then have an impact on the way you perceive your own goodness or your own worthiness. That is definitely problematic. If you've decided to restrict your diet and not bring certain foods into the house because you have made a decision about how you, like something positive about what you want to achieve, and you don't want to waste time or willpower fighting the urge to not eat the entire bag of, in your case, gummy foods.
Oh, yeah.
Not a candy I like.
Can't bring those gummy worms in the house.
That's different, right? Like if you've made a choice based on a positive why, like I want to be healthier, I want to be more comfortable with my own digestion, I want to not have to waste willpower or time, and sort of streamline my habits to achieve these positive goals. That's a different story.
Yes.
That's a good place.
And I think that's where I want to. That's where I come from when I discuss goals and goal setting and eating habits with my clients. I comes from that personal me where restricting never works well. Restricting
and I think like as a coach, when you're seeing somebody with their lifts, you kind of get a feeling of what their personality is like. Like you and I both have worked with individuals where when they're learning a lift, and a squat in particular is difficult for a lot of people to learn, especially if they've been used to doing like something CrossFit body weight where it's a more upright torso. Learning that low bar form is difficult. And when you work with somebody who straight off the bat is like having low-key temper tantrums that they aren't picking it up fast enough, I mean, that's a yellow flag that is a person who probably has a streak of perfectionism, is a little bit too hard on themselves. And that's a person that when they start asking me about, nutrition, I will give them very vague and very general guidelines.
Yes.
I do not tell them eat this, eat that, because I've already seen based on their performance learning a movement pattern, how hard they are on themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not something I want to encourage either. But that's sort of like how you can feel that out about different people that you don't know that you're coaching. I mean, like, you know that about yourself.
Right.
I know that about myself.
Right.
I told you before, like, we don't have a scale in our house. Like, I told you that story, because I spent a long time, at this point I probably should, but that was something that for a long time I spent way too much time and energy tracking. Anyway.
Yep. So I think that's that goes along with quite a few things as far as like, goals and how people should approach if they're looking to make any changes with their nutrition. It's best to try to have an approach goal versus an avoidance goal, and that will lend you more to flexible eating as opposed to rigid eating, and there's a much more positive focus on that than a negative focus. And because I think we don't, even though we think that doesn't sound negative, well, I need to do this. I'm like, yes, but think about in terms of how will you be able to accomplish that if you're constantly thinking of yourself and in a bad way, in a negative way. It's not gonna go well. So we have a couple, two other goals, and I think we can get through pretty quickly, or two thoughts about two concepts. In regards to training, so we've been talking about goal setting in regards to nutrition, but what about with training and going to the gym? I mean, obviously we are strength coaches, so our focus is on strength training, and we try to instill a love of training with people when they come. They want to get stronger. They have this desire to get stronger, but then what does that really mean to them once they get there and once they start to have to come in week to week? Some people, it's very easy. They're there 3 days a week, 4 days a week, always at the same time. They have no issues, with what's going on. They know exactly what they want. They enjoy the process of training. They enjoy the energy at the gym. And then you have others who their goals are a little bit more wishy-washy. They don't know why they're there. How do you help somebody in that, in that sense of like when learn to love the training the process? They've embarked on this journey of wanting to get stronger, but where does that lead? Now what do they do? They're there, they like it, but they're having a hard time really sticking to that weekly process, that weekly training.
Wait, are you speaking hypothetically, or are you asking me?
I'm speaking hypothetically and also asking you. I actually had a client who, she said to me at the beginning of January, I have goals. And I said, okay, what are your goals? She's like, I want to get my squat up. I said, okay. And this is someone who had been, and she told me I could use her name. I told her, and I said, no, but she wasn't very consistent for like a couple months. COVID, work, right. And then just not wanting to come in, just not having the will to come in, right? Motivation. And I said to her, she said, I have a goal. I want, what should my goal be? I'm like, well, what do you mean? What should your goal be? What do you want? I want my squat. I want to get my squat up. I really want to get my squat up. And she's a strong young woman. I said, well, here are my thoughts. Get in twice a week. And she just looked at me. I said, that's it. I said, get in twice a week. Commit to twice a week, no matter what. Don't tell me you're going to come in 3 times a week. Don't tell me, I'm not going to give you a number for the squat. I have no idea what number you're going to, just get in twice a week. And she did. She got in twice a week. I saw her for the entire month of January. Now I've been out sick, unfortunately, with COVID, so I can't keep track of everybody right now, but she was coming in, and guess what? She hit PRs on all of her lifts eventually after just 3 weeks, because she got in, and it was more just, there was no goal there. It was how do you, and that's what I did with her. She's one person. I have a number of people like that, but how do you help somebody? What can we say to people to help them learn the love of training? What goal can we give them?
I mean, I guess basically what you did in that situation, right, is you just a lot of people, because of advertising and the fitness industry, get caught up in all these sort of bells and whistles. This applies to nutrition as well as training, right? There's some newfangled training technique that gets, sold in some magazine. You've got to do all these different exercises, all these different reps. It sounds really exciting. It's going to distract you from what you're doing in the gym. Or there's some really weird diet plan that you're supposed to follow where it's complicated. And what most people need are the big building blocks: consistency and just eat real foods. Don't eat processed shit.
That's it.
Right. So, and that's not exciting. It's not sexy.
Boring.
It's not going to sell lots of magazines and articles and whatever. And people don't always think about it in those terms. They're like, well, that's what I saw in this recent magazine, so that must be the newest best thing. They don't think of it in terms of they're trying to sell me something, and I actually don't even realize that they did just sell me their idea. And now I think I need their product. But yeah, for most people, just the big pieces, right? But then also connecting that, to the why, so if somebody isn't, finding the motivation to come into the gym, help them figure out what is their bigger overall, connects to their identity, motivating reason for getting into the gym. Some people are competitive, and the squat number or the barbell, whatever they've got on their bar for their deadlift, is the motivating factor. I lived there for a little while, but that's not actually really so consistent with my personality. So it's and we talk about this before, process versus product, or training versus performance, that kind of thing. A lot of people are competitive and are motivated by the outcome and by their PRs and by what they would, their performance in a meet. Or if you're talking about nutrition, even their performance when they stand on the scale, did they achieve that goal? Or their performance when they put on that red cocktail dress, or, just that, those are performances also. But, if you love the process, you're going to be a lot more invested in it. You're going to show up more regularly. So trying to find a way to love the process. And there's plenty of people who are I want to get stronger, especially some of the older clients that I work with. They want to get stronger. They understand the practical reasons for it, but they maybe really don't love barbell training. And so in those situations, it's a lot of people think about that, one of my clients whose father trains with Sully has those t-shirts, John takes iron for back pain, like that sort of thing. Like there's a bigger overarching reason, right? And that's the medicine. Iron is the medicine. And so, you get older, you realize you got to take medicine for different things. So you avoid feeling achy and old and incapacitated, and that's just what you've got to do. And maybe you have to approach it with that attitude, but then try to find a way to balance the medicine with something that you do at the gym that's more enjoyable to you, or balance the medicine a couple days a week with some other active pursuits that you find more enjoyable, right? So finding that balance for a person, helping a person to tap into what their big overarching reason is, and trying to help them find a way to love the process, maybe more, but at least as much as they love the outcome, is kind of what I try and do with people.
Yeah. And I think listening to you say, tap into somebody, like what, kind of giving them something that's going to make them want to come. So I said something to her, and then I was talking about getting in and this and that. And somehow I mentioned sled drags, and she like perked up. She said, sled drags. I want to do sled drags. And I was like, you can do sled drags after you train. It's kind of like you can have your dessert after you, eat your vegetables. And so then she started coming in 3 times a week, because on the third day she got to drag a sled. Or then I had her push the prowler and carry do farmer's carries with the farmer's handles.
Yeah, I would totally come in for that day too.
And she was like, holy crap, so she came in and she was like over there benching and pressing away. And then she set the farmer's hand. I had the farmer's handles out for her. I had the prowler out for her. And it was like, I said, next week we'll carry kegs. And then I said, and then you can train for strong woman. And it was like, strong woman.
But see, you've introduced for her an element of play.
Exactly.
Right? And that's a thing that adults lose touch with.
And with Sarah, Sarah, I said your name.
How is this fun? How can I make this fun?
She made it fun for herself. Just by, for someone else, that would have been torture. Like we always joke with people, like, are you pushing that prowler for like yourself, or did Emily make you do that? People want to play. That's why I have my basic training class, and we do the strong woman in that class too. It's fun. It's more enjoyable than just getting on that damn bike or elliptical machine, right? And I would love to have that programmed into my program, and I could probably put that in my program. But for me, I don't necessarily need that. I don't need that play in order for me to get into the gym to work on my press.
Right. Well, but with the basic training, it's the play plus the camaraderie.
Exactly.
It's the social aspect as well. And a lot of people I'm not one of them, but there's a lot of social people out there. There's a lot of people who are not introverts, who like to be chit-chatting with other people, or interacting with other people. And that's a draw for them.
And if I have my clients, my couple who come once a week, and they, they're active, they walk everywhere, but they come once a week because they've got busy lives. I put as much into that one day that they come as I can, because that's important to them. And they have made incredible progress over the 10 years that they've been with me. And people are like, but once a week only? I'm like, hey, they come religiously once a week. You don't understand. It's once a week, but it's every week.
Well, and that's a thing too, right? Like when you're talking about get as strong as possible, as quickly as possible, and there's a program for how you achieve that goal. That's one goal. People have different goals, right? As strong as possible, as quickly as possible for someone who has 10 years of time to give you, but only 1 day a week.
Right.
We can work with that.
We can work with that. And I have. Yeah. And my longest, the wife is my longest running client. She's been with me since July of 2011. I opened my doors in June of 2011. So, would I rather have that and have that person come once a week? And of course. That's a no-brainer. Are you kidding me? I want to work with that person. I will continually, want to train that person. The person who comes in once every 5 weeks, not so much. That's harder for me to, I have a harder time.
Especially if the person who's coming in once every 5 weeks has in their mind that they're going to achieve this particular goal, even though they haven't showed up.
And then they take up too much of my time trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I can't, that's harder for me to wrap my head around. I'm going to have a much harder time wanting to train that person, because it's like, you don't get me today. because you decided to come in, 5 weeks later, and there's no real reason for you to have missed the 5 weeks prior to this.
I mean, are they training at home?
No,
or...
right. No, this is just, but I mean, and it goes back to, we all want to, we always come back to, at least at the gym, we always come back to the Ronnie Coleman, quote, everybody want to be a bodybuilder, but nobody want to lift no heavy ass weights. So we all want to be stronger. We all want to do something right. We all want to go to the gym, but then how do we get there? And once we're there, what do we do? And what do we do with our time? And we're there is the harder part. So having a specific reason can be hard to develop and to reason with yourself. So having a coach to maybe help you, or having people to help you kind of get an idea of like, well, what's your reason for? What's your why do you want to be stronger? Is it because you want to have stronger bones as you age? Is it because you don't want to have anybody help you carry your groceries? What's the reason? It's because you want to look good, in a bathing suit. That's fine. We can help you with that. I mean, it doesn't matter, but have a reason. And if you learn to love the training process, then the outcome, the practice will be,
its own reward.
Exactly. Its own reward.
Well, and that's the thing too. I was sort of thinking about, because I'm more, a process person, I suppose. But like process versus product, or people who are more motivated by PRs or meets or whatever. And that's fine. But it kind of, like we were talking about with food or rigid goals or that sort of thing, like as long as you sort of, people have different, I guess I don't necessarily want to say this in regards at all to like a competitive athlete. That's a different animal. But like for most people with average abilities, if they're getting overly caught up in the outcome, in the process, that often seems to tie in with people who have that sort of obsessive or perfectionist streak, and if they don't achieve that PR goal or that meet goal, instead of just being able to say, this was a great experience and I did my best and today just wasn't my day and I'll come back and, train and try again or whatever, they get really wrapped up in it and start to feel bad about themselves. And,
right.
Just knowing who you are and understanding what motivates you, I think can help this, any of these things be more healthful overall, and always just keeping in mind, like in terms of performance or a PR or a scale weight goal or a fit into the dress goal, right? Like if you weren't enough, if you didn't think you were enough before you hit that goal, even if you hit that goal, you're still not going to think you're enough.
Yeah.
Right. So you might get like a little temporary, like, I'm good enough. I believe in myself now. But if you felt really kind of like, I don't know, driven from a negative mental place to begin with, achieving that PR, hitting that scale weight goal, fitting into that dress, that's not going to change.
Right.
Just because you did the thing.
Right. Right. And for the most part, the people that, I work with, and I'm assuming people that you work with, 90% of those people are enjoying the process.
Yeah.
They're the ones who you see it week to week. They're the ones I see in the gym on a weekly basis. And they might have a goal. They might have a number goal, but it's not the reason they're there. They're there because they are enjoying the process. They see week to week the difference that in themselves. The difference in their bodies, the difference in their strength, the difference in how the weight moves, the technique is better. There's the program has changed. It's been 5 weeks and now we've made adjustments to the program. So it's a new, it's a new program. That's motivating. Those are the people who have learned to love the training process. They may have already been there, or they decided that they wanted to get stronger and they wanted to, use this, learn the barbell lifts, and now they've really gotten into it. They've really embraced it. They have those days where things don't go as planned, but they don't give up. They come back the next day. They adjust their schedules. They make sure they're getting enough sleep. They make sure that they're eating enough protein, right? Those are the people who have decided that It's not my fault that they're not making progress. It's not their fault that they're not making progress, in the sense of like, they're doing what they're supposed to, but maybe something needs to adjust in their schedule. And they're going to have a day. They're going to have days, and that's okay. It's part of the process. It's part of the training. Those you don't have to worry about. It's other people. It's the other 10%, the other 10% who have to you have to figure out. And then once they figured it out, they become part of that 90%. And then you've got the other.
But for any of those, the 90%, the 10%, whatever, another piece that's really helpful is having a coping strategy, right? Because like you said, there are going to be days that are not your day. And maybe that's a day where, I don't know, accumulated stress, lack of sleep, poor eating, whatever. You didn't do the number, you couldn't get the number of reps you were supposed to, the weight was too, whatever. Right. Or you ate the cake you didn't mean to eat, or just whatever the thing is that you were trying not to do. Well, so what do you do after that? How do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? Like if you have a day where things go off the rails, having a plan already in place for how to address that, or how to be able to think about that is helpful, instead of just kind of letting whatever sense of disappointment you might be feeling run the show. Just because you have a feeling about something doesn't mean it should be running the show.
That's right.
You can have the feeling, you can recognize the feeling, and then you can choose something different.
I mean, I have a client who that happened to him. You know, he was deadlifting, and the last warm up he pulled, and it looked good, but I didn't realize that his back kind of, felt a little funny. He said, after that, then he went to do his work set weight, and the bar wouldn't come off the floor. And the last week it had come off the floor, no problem. 5 pounds lighter. So I he sat down, and I went over to him, and he's a guy who kind of, he's really quite aware of, of himself. He said to me, my back kind of felt funny on that last warm up. I'm not going to deadlift anymore. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to move on to the press and squat and see how things feel. I was like, perfect. That's great. That's exactly what you should do. I mean, there wasn't this brouhaha. There wasn't this, he walked out the door. This wasn't, he didn't come back later. He came back. There wasn't
this like, oh my God, my body is failing me.
He pressed, he did a little bit of squatting. And then the next time he came in, he'd been away. He was away for a week because he'd, gone away with people, and then someone had come back positive. So it gave him his own deload. It gave him a chance to just kind of like stay away. He came back, things still felt a little funny, but he came back and he had a plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to work up. It was like, I didn't even need to tell him what to do. He already knew. And I think it was already ingrained in him that he doesn't just stop. He's there. He can walk, he can drive, he's fine. He just needs to be mindful. He just needs to be mindful of how things feel and work up to what he can, stop when it doesn't feel quite right, and move on to the next exercise, which is exactly what he did. Yeah. And he's back at it. He's back to where he was. But he had a coping strategy. I didn't even have to tell him that. Most of my clients already have that coping strategy kind of built into their own mindset, because they understand the training process. Others who haven't been doing that as long may not know that and don't have that. And so
I have a question.
That's harder.
Is this one of your younger clients or one of your older clients?
He's in his 40s.
Yeah. Because, I think that's also like a learning process.
Yeah. My mom's hips been bothering me for a little bit, but she came in yesterday and she's like, I still have to do something. It doesn't bother me when I lift. It doesn't bother me when I squat, when I do. So I had her just, do something. She followed the whole plan. I said, how do you feel? She goes, I feel great. I feel much better. She knows that movement. She knows she can take a break when she needs to, and my mom will. But she also knows that she feels better when she does something. Right. And she knows that doing something is better than not doing anything at all. And it has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with just, she's 73, 72. I mean, our bodies are going to hurt sometimes.
Right.
But her coping strategy is, I'm going to, do what I can, what feels right. Okay, that feels right. And then adjust as she needs to. Again, there's not this all or nothing attitude, which unfortunately, when some of us have that, that's not the right kind of coping strategy.
Yeah. being able to be flexible as opposed to rigid. We've talked about that. Not having black and white, all or nothing.
That's it.
Yeah.
It goes along with that. It goes along with your, everything. Yeah. So that's exactly what I wanted to touch on.
I think we covered it.
I think we did it. And I think we did it in just the right amount of time too, because I'm looking at the time. So if you want to hear a longer version
where they bring the receipts
of this, where they bring in exactly, they bring
the receipts.
they have the studies to back this up. Check out the Stronger by Science podcast with Eric Trexler and Greg Nuckols. They do a great job. It's a very long podcast, but it goes into much more detail. You'll hear a lot more about the who, the what, the when, the why, the how with them and studies that were done. And these two are, these guys are great at what they do. They give a lot of detail, and it makes for a good hour, 2 hours, I think the podcast was, something like that.
It was a while.
But it was they check them out, Stronger by Science. I think we're going to end there for our first podcast back in the 2022 year. We will be back in another 2 weeks with our next topic. We're going to talk about getting started when we're older, training for the older client, the older athlete. We've done something similar before.
Not older as in like masters.
No.
Competition where you're like 40. 40 is not old.
Because I think people start to look at themselves when they turn a certain age as all of a sudden that's it. Their bodies are falling apart, they're falling apart, and they're 40 years old.
Oh, I've heard that at 30.
I hear that. I hear that from my 30-year-olds
I've gotten that from clients at 30, and I'm like, clearly you don't know how old I am. Otherwise, you would not have said that.
We've talked about this in the past, but I think this we need to bring it back to light again, because there have been some things that you've encountered with a couple of your clients who get tired of people reminding them about their age, and I think that goes a lot of different ways. Like,
just hold on to it. Don't do the whole podcast now.
Sorry. My bad. I haven't talked to Rebecca in so long.
Box that up for the next one.
Except via text, that I get excited because I actually have seen people for the first time. It's been like a week and a half, and I haven't.
Are you in quarantine?
I left my house. I know. I feel like I keep testing myself, going, today I'm going to be negative, and it keeps coming back.
Yeah. No. Are you still testing yourself?
Yes.
Do not do that. Once you test positive on a home test, you can continue to test positive for 90 days.
I still have, I think, symptoms, and I think that's what's going on. So come day 10, I'm done, which is Saturday. Yeah. But I'm going to be, I'm going to be cognizant of the fact that people don't want to, be around me while I'm still congested and have, or it's all up here in my head. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I'm thinking positive. Not positive as in positive test.
Stay positive, test negative.
Positive that I will be negative soon.
Okay.
All right, great. So we'll wrap it up. That's it for today. We're done for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back in a couple weeks with our second podcast of 2022. Thanks, everybody. You can always email us, find us at Emily@5by3.com. I'm so in my head, I can't even think straight. I told Rebecca it was November next month, or no, it was November 2 that month instead of February. And you can find Rebecca at
cornerstonestrengthmaryland@gmail.com.
So contact us always with your questions, comments, and concerns. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week. Or no, 2 weeks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.